Good afternoon, everybody. This has been an amazing event, and I'm really excited and proud to present Kristina Kuzmic. And many of you know her as hilarious and sweet and charming. And she has a great story to tell us today, and I hope you enjoy this. And also, please come tomorrow for Kristina's Q&A, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.
I have my coffee because I'm a real Croatian. I married an American who doesn't like coffee. We're going to need marriage therapy for that. We'll get through it. Hi, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I don't have a Croatian community in LA where I live, so this is the most Croatians I've been around in the United States. So I am so happy right now. I'm craving cevapi and burek and štrukle. I want all of it. So I was 14 when my family moved to the United States from Croatia. I was born in Zagreb and then grew up in Osijek, so most of my childhood was in Osijek. And just like most people who moved to the United States, we moved here for a better life, an easier life. And what's interesting to me is that when my life got really hard, which I will share with you in a little bit, it was actually the lessons I learned in Croatia through my childhood, through the people there, that saved me from my absolute lowest point. So I moved to America. I have the very typical culture shock. I'm a freshman in high school. I have no friends. I'm the weirdo, all that stuff, right? I survive all of it because we all survive things. And then years later, I find myself divorced with 2 little kids. They were both still in diapers, a 1.5-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it was a very, very painful divorce. At that point, my family had already moved back to Croatia. So I had nobody living near me. I was completely on my own as far as family support. And I end up completely broke after my divorce. I couldn't even afford an apartment just for myself, so I shared a small bedroom with my kids and had a roommate in the other room. And couldn't afford a bed, so I slept on the floor. And a friend of mine bought bunk beds for my kids so they wouldn't have to sleep on the floor. And I sunk really, really, really deep into depression. I ended up on food stamps, and even with food stamps, I couldn't afford, rent some months, and I would beg my landlord, just give me 3 more days. I was waiting tables. I was doing bookkeeping at another restaurant, even though I suck at math, but I just pretended I knew what I was doing. I don't think that restaurant is still in business, and I'm not taking the blame for it. But I was doing anything I could desperately, just trying to make ends meet. I had a friend who actually worked at Starbucks, and you know how they sell the little sandwiches and salads and stuff? When they expired, they throw them out. So this friend of mine convinced the boss, the manager, hey, I know this single mom with 2 little kids, they're really broke. Instead of throwing them out, can we give them to her? And so once a week, he would bring me the Starbucks bag with stale muffins. They weren't, poisonous, they were just stale, and old salads, wilted salads and sandwiches, and that's what my kids and I ate a lot of days. So I still have like this emotional connection to Starbucks because of it, although the non-stale version is way better. But so the worst part of that wasn't just the financial struggle, and all of you parents understand how hard it is parenting anyway, but even harder when you're on your own and you have these 2 little kids and you don't have the means to give them their basic needs. You start feeling completely worthless. So I got to a point where I hated myself so much, and I thought that my kids definitely deserved better than me. And so I started a list. I had a list that I kept very secret, hidden, and it was a pros and cons list of how my suicide would affect my children. And there were more things on the pros list than the cons list. Because when you sink so deep into depression, and you contemplate suicide, and I know we've all heard of, especially last year, Kate Spade, and, we hear about these celebrities or parents who commit suicide, and we think, how selfish. How dare you do that? You have children. But I know what it's like to have that mindset, and when you're that low, what you believe is that your kids will actually be better off without you. You're going to do them a favor if you take your life. That's how low I was. You have to be in a hell of a lot of pain to think that way, and I was in a hell of a lot of pain. So I had this list, and I never tried committed suicide, but I thought about it a lot. And I hated everything about my life and my circumstances. And when you get that low, you become self-consumed. I mean, I literally was obsessed with my own self-pity. All I thought about, I breathed, I lived, I ate, I made out with the fact that my life sucks. Everything sucks. And one night, I had just tucked my kids into bed and I couldn't sleep again because I was stressed out. And this feisty side of me kicked in that night. I had become so sick of myself, so sick of the way I felt. But this night, instead of once again thinking about, am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? Should I end my life? Okay, I got to come up with a plan. What will happen to my kids? Instead of that, this night, again, that feisty side of me kicked in, and I thought, the only way to get out of this poor me, my life sucks state is to start thinking of others. Maybe if I can think about somebody else's needs, it'll distract me from my own needs. And that's something that was instilled in me. I remember when I was little, and we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up in Osijek. And there would be knocks on the doors occasionally. Every few weeks, somebody would knock on the door, and it would be somebody begging for money, which was pretty typical at that time in Croatia. And my mom would open the door, and I remember, it was like a mother with a child or whoever, and she would beg my mom for money. And my mom would never give her money, but she would take the loaf of bread, even if it was our last loaf of bread, and she would give it to her. And that stayed with me, that idea of thinking of others. So I thought maybe this is what could save me. So all excited with this new plan, I started calling the local hospitals and homeless shelters and soup kitchens, offering to volunteer. I thought I'm gonna go spend every free moment I can with my kids volunteering, and then I will feel like I'm doing something good, and maybe it'll distract me from how much my life sucks. And I got rejected from every single place. I know. I mean, I already feel like a loser, and you get rejected for volunteering. Like, I was an overachiever at being a loser. Not to brag, but that's me. And the reason they rejected me, they had really good reasons. I had, at that point, a 2- and a 3-year-old, and they would have to come with me because I couldn't afford a babysitter. Now, any of you who have had toddlers, can you imagine them at a soup kitchen or a hospital or home? Like, they're going to destroy the place. They will set it on fire. It'll be worse off than when you came. So they had good reasons, but still, here I was with my first brilliant thought of how I was going to save myself from this misery, and I got rejected. But that feisty side of me wouldn't ease up, and I thought, fine. Nobody will have me. I'll figure it out on my own. And as I sat there thinking, what is the one thing I can do? What is the one thing I feel confident? Even when I feel like a loser, even when I hate myself, even when I feel like my life isn't worth living and my children deserve better than me, is there one tiny little thing I'm confident in? And the only thing I could think of is that my grandmother taught me how to cook since I was 5 years old. She taught me how to make sarma and all that delicious stuff. And for a split second, I had this moment of, who cares? Like, what am I going to do with that? I can cook. Most people can cook. Who cares? But instead of engaging that negative thought again, I decided I was going to do something with it. So I took that one little thing I was confident in, which again seemed like nothing at the time, and I impulsively wrote an email to all of my contacts in the area. And I said, every Wednesday night, I'm going to feed people. No idea how I'm going to pull it off, but I'm going to feed people. So if you know anyone who's struggling financially, bring them over to my place. Maybe they're not struggling financially. Most people at that time probably had a lot more money than me. If they're new to town and they're just lonely, maybe it's an elderly man who just lost his spouse and he just needs some company. Maybe it's a college kid who's sick of cafeteria food. Whatever the need is, I will feed them Wednesday night. And then that first Wednesday rolled around, and I went to one of my favorite places, the dollar store. Anybody else, people? You can find so many great things there. I still am friends with the dollar store. We're not in an intimate dating relationship like we were back then, but I'm still friends with it. I went there and I just bought anything I could find. Some pasta and veggies and cheese. I wasn't trying to follow a recipe because we Croatians don't follow recipes. I was just trying to create the biggest meal I could on a very tiny budget. And I cleaned my apartment, and I got my roommate's permission to do this crazy thing, and I got my little ones to hand out napkins, and I taught them my older one how to pour water. And 6 o'clock rolled around, and I opened my front door, and nobody was there. And I thought, of course, my friends are so embarrassed about how low I had sunk, how depressed I am, what a mess I am, what a crappy little apartment I live in, that I can't even get my kids clothes that don't have holes in them, that I'm feeding them stale. I mean, I'm loud, I can do it without breakfast. Who would ever bring somebody to my place? But a few minutes later, 2 or 3 people showed up. And then more people showed up. And then more people showed up. And by the end of that evening, I've told this story 100 times and I still get choked up. By the end of that evening, I fed over 30 people in my tiny little apartment, on my tiny little budget, with my tiny little kids. And these people, were so grateful to me. In my eyes, I was a pathetic, useless mess. These people weren't looking down on me. They were looking up at me, thanking me. I needed this night. I needed this company. I needed this meal. They were thanking me for something I provided. Me, useless, worthless Kristina, provided. And I will never forget closing the door after that last person left. I literally, like a movie scene that's cheesy and dramatic, I fell to the floor and I sobbed. I mean, I don't remember the last time I cried so hard. And it wasn't the tears of hopelessness that I had cried so many nights before. It was tears of hope. I felt like a broken little girl who finally experienced her first glimmer of hope. And that was a major turning point for me. And no, things didn't become magically amazing right after that, because that's not how life works. Going from hating your life to feeling like your life is okay and good and then amazing, that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of feistiness. It takes a lot of patience. It takes refusing to be passive and apathetic. So it took a while, but that was my turning point, because that's when I realized, even when I feel like I have nothing, even when I feel completely worthless, I am not worthless. I have something to offer. My problem was I was focusing on all the things I didn't have and couldn't do instead of the small things I did have and could do. Cooking. It seemed like such a small, insignificant thing, which a lot of times we do. We take the little thing we know how to do and we do have, and we undermine it. We insult it. We set it aside. It's not important. Instead of taking that and growing it into something amazing. During the war in Croatia, there was this man by the name of Zorislav Laksar, and I actually talk about him in my book. He was so distraught by the war, and he was actually from my hometown, Osijek. He was so distraught by the war and just felt the need to do something. And so what he decided to do is, after attacks on our city, he would walk around the city and he would collect shrapnel that he would find from the grenades that were thrown on our city. He found these in places where children were murdered, where houses were destroyed, and he would pick them up, and he would collect the shrapnel, and he would take it home. And without any formal training in art whatsoever, I don't think he had ever taken an art class in his life, he decided to take the shrapnel and build these amazing statues out of it. And I actually own one. Can you put that slide up if you have it? So this is all completely created from shrapnel, and it's a mother. She's carrying a bag or wood or something. She's got another bag in her hand with a little girl who's carrying a teddy bear. I wish I could show it to you 3D, because it's so moving and stunning to see something that literally destroyed lives taken and created into something so beautiful. I felt like Wednesday night dinners were my sculptures. I took the destroyed pieces of my life, instead of passively looking at them and saying, here's the mess, here's all the stuff that's wrong, here's all the stuff that's destroyed, here's all the stuff that didn't go the way I wanted it to go, the way I envisioned my life. Instead of just sitting there passively, I started picking up piece after piece and building and building and building and building. And I can tell you now, my life is more beautiful than ever, because I kept building and building and building. There's another story from Croatia that's had a really strong impact on my life. When I was 15 or 16, so we had already lived in America, a family friend who was also a former babysitter of mine was getting married. So we flew back to Croatia for her wedding, and she asked me to play piano at her wedding, which is ridiculous because I'm not a good pianist. Like, there are way better choices, but I find myself in life always thrown into these situations that I'm not prepared for. And so we flew there, and we were all excited, and then the night before the wedding, we found out that there would be a huge battle the next day, which actually ended up being the final major battle in the war in Croatia. And the whole city would be shut down. So the bakery where she ordered the cake, shut down. The florist where she ordered the flowers from, shut down. Early that morning, the best man was called in to fight. Everything was definitely pointing to the direction of this wedding is obviously not taking place. Well, my friend Melita and her husband decided, we're done with this war. Like we can't, it's impacted our lives so much already. It's taken so much away. We're not gonna let it destroy our wedding. So they decided to go through with this wedding. So while there's literally bombs flying outside, we're in this tiny church that I grew up in, and I'm playing a very mediocre version of a gospel song, and it was the quickest wedding ceremony I'd ever been to. And right after the wedding ceremony, we all go into the basement of the church. And because the restaurant couldn't provide the food, and there were no flowers, and there was no cake, what did Croatians do? They showed up, because that's what we do. So people brought sarma, and they brought cookies, and they brought cakes, and they brought flowers. And I'm telling you right now, it was the most amazing wedding. Here we are in a basement with war and destruction happening outside. We are in a basement, and we are singing, and we are dancing, and we are eating, and we are partying with the people we love the most. And at the end, which, Croatian weddings go till morning, when the celebration was done, we moved the tables out of the way, and all the guests laid down, and we slept there, just side by side like sardines. We spent the night there. I think about that a lot as I go through my life, especially the hard stuff that I've been through. When figurative bombs, not literal bombs, but figurative bombs get thrown my way, and let's be honest, we've all been there. We've all had struggles in our life. Your struggles might be completely different than mine, but you've had struggles. It's a part of being a human. So when those figurative bombs that we don't expect get thrown my way, I have a choice. I'm going to live in fear. I'm going to put my life on hold. I'm going to feel stuck. I'm going to get passive. I'm going to feel hopeless. Or I'm going to make the best of it, and I'm going to celebrate, and I'm going to find those ways to get creative and be proactive and not let those bombs get in the way of me fully living my life. So I wanted to share that with you because I want to give you that visual. My grandmother, she's passed since, but she was probably the strongest influence in my life, very typical Croatian grandma who, once you said you were full after a big meal, made you eat 3 more plates. And she's the one who taught me to cook, so I am so grateful to her because, again, I feel like cooking saved my life. I would occasionally cut her hair. She would ask me to cut her hair when I was an adult, and I can't cut hair. Again, thrown into situations I'm not prepared for. So she'd say, can you give me a trim? And I'd try and trim her hair. And the whole time I'm cutting her hair, I would apologize. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't know if it'll be straight. Oh, my gosh. And she would, I will never forget, she would always grab my hand and she would just say, ne brini, divno je, which means don't worry, it's wonderful. And I think about those words a lot. I had this idea of what moving to America would look like. I had this idea of what getting married would look like and having children would look like. I had basically these unrealistic fantasies that we all sort of set up. We have this plan for how it's all going to look. And then when it doesn't turn out that way, we feel inadequate, and we get filled with fear, and we get stuck. And I'm learning to stop chasing the fairy tale and embrace the messy adventure. And when things don't go my way, when things aren't exactly how I planned, to stop pining for what I thought it should all look like, and just tell myself, ne brini, divno je. Don't worry, it's wonderful. It's not perfect. It's not how you envisioned it. But if you focus on what you can do and do have, it's wonderful. My book is called Hold On But Don't Hold Still, because that's sort of become my motto. Life will surprise us in the worst possible ways, and I'm sure all of you have a story where life surprised you in the worst possible way, that you just did not see it coming. And in those situations, I've learned to hold on to hope, hold on to my loved ones, hold on to what really matters, but don't hold still. Don't sit passively. Don't wait for this or that to happen before I choose to fully live my life. Be proactive. Don't hold still. But then also, and I can if we had time, I could tell you 1,000 stories of how wonderful my life has been too. Life will surprise you in the most amazing ways, most incredible ways you never saw coming. And in those times also, hold on, but don't hold still. Hold on to all the good coming your way. Hold on to those moments, but don't hold still. Don't get stuck in your complacency. Don't get stuck in taking things for granted. Keep moving forward. Don't hold still. Keep moving forward with gratitude and feistiness and courage and kindness. Thank you so much for having me.